All right, there we go. So for those of you I haven't met or met in person, my name is Sarah Burke. I'm the Community Engagement Manager out of the Atlanta office, and I oversee our Community Engagement Specialist in Atlanta, Savannah, and Birmingham. So we had a wonderful volunteer appreciation events last week and got to hear, just some feedback and questions that people had, and it was really helpful. It was really wonderful to connect with people in person. And there were a lot of questions that, were different topics. So we want to, this will, begin a series, but I was trying to clump together some similar themes that people had and see if we can answer, a lot of people's questions in one webinar. And then, but there are other topics we'll get to. So we're not answering everybody's questions tonight, but. So if you'll share your name and email in the chat so we can share this PowerPoint afterwards if you are here tonight, and also just helps us know. I mean, right now we just have a few people and I recognize them, but as people trickle in, I'll probably mention that again. And if you have your name and email in there, it'll be easy for them to know what is expected. I hope this seminar provides you with some practical ways to empower refugees and immigrants. That's really the goal of this webinar. Is how can we come alongside our refugees and immigrants and guide them to thriving. So I wanted to start with, like I said, things that you probably already know. This is in our orientation, but it may have been a while since you took the orientation, or there's just so much content in the orientation. Oh, it looks like to how people join. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I heard it and now I don't.
Went ahead and admitted her. I think I have permission to do that,
great.
So I'll keep an eye on that.
Thank you so much. Yay. Okay, great. All right, so let me make sure I'm still sharing. There I am. Okay. So our mission at Inspiritus is, well, a little bit about Inspiritus. We're a voluntary refugee resettlement agency. We're an affiliate of the Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services. You may know we don't work specifically with Lutherans, but we work with people of all faiths. But there's 9 resettlement agencies in the U.S. And 9 national agencies, and one of those is what we call LIRS. And so we're under the umbrella of LIRS. Each year we assist thousands of refugees and asylees and immigrants on their journey from surviving to thriving across our offices, which are now in Atlanta, Savannah, Birmingham, and soon to be Nashville. But this is what I really wanted to focus on. We are assisting them on their journey from surviving to thriving. And that we aim to help new Americans achieve self-sufficiency and integrate successfully into their new communities and country. Oftentimes when we are renewing our grant applications or we're having to report is federal contracts that we have, federal and state contracts to resettle refugees. One of the questions that comes up over and over and over again is percentage of clients who are now self-sufficient. And we really define self-sufficient as, ability to, they're working and they are learning English and they're able to live on their own without needing ongoing daily or regular care from us as the agency, but ideally also from not needing ongoing assistance from the volunteers who come alongside them in the very beginning. And so that's our goal. And, recently we've kind of revamped how we partner with faith partners and what that looks like for a co-sponsorship. And if you've been with us a long time, you might know that we used to connect co-sponsors with refugee families for a year. But what we noticed is that long-term, more disciplined relationship creates a dependency on the volunteers, and our goal is self-sufficiency. And so we've shortened that to 6 months, and that doesn't mean you can't maintain a friendship and be involved with the family that you're volunteering for, but the goal in my mind is that when you're connected with a client in the very beginning, you have the end in mind. You're already thinking about what it looks like for you to not be right there and to do everything for them. And hopefully that perspective encourages you to do things with them and not just for them. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight, because that sounds really great when I'm teaching it in orientation, but it's a lot more challenging when you get into the practical, nitty gritty. So let's keep moving. Oh, here we go. So our mission, that was that was about Inspiritus. Our mission is to guide individuals and families on a path from surviving to thriving. And again, I want to say this because this is the goal. This is the theme of the entire seminar we're doing tonight, is we empower those whose lives have been disrupted to discover their strengths and resilience and accompany them as they grow into vibrant contributors to their own community. I was talking to one of my staff coworkers today, and I found out we needed some work done, some kind of contract work done on one of the places that one of our families are staying that is not an apartment, so it's not managed by a lease. And we hired a former client to do the work, and I loved that. I'm like, here we are going to them and saying, we need you, we need your skills, we need what you have to offer, and now you're contributing to your community and giving back through through your skills, and also a job. So let's talk a little bit about resettlement and volunteers, and kind of where you fall into the journey and what a role of a volunteer is. Now, I know that volunteers are helping us with many different things. So we might have people who are helping organize storage unit or helping set up an apartment and may never actually interact with one of our families, and that is just as important and just as needed. You are working to help us build our capacity so that we can serve more families. You might be volunteering doing admin work, which we are so grateful for, the volunteers who are kind of behind the scenes and really keeping us going, and potentially may not even be interacting with a family at all. Then we have volunteers who, come in and do so much. Honestly, there are times where I'm talking to some of my coworkers that I don't know how we would do the work we do if we didn't have this volunteer group. They've been so helpful. They've provided so many different needs, and we're really thankful. So I understand that there's volunteers play different roles, but they're all valuable. And our refugees, we're going to talk about different refugees and immigrant statuses, but specifically for our refugees, they're people who have fled war and violence, conflict. They cross an international border to find safety in another country. I think it's really helpful to remember that all of our immigrants are coming from different places and different places in life. Especially with the Afghans, we've been able to kind of have an example right there of people who had degrees and who had careers, who went to university and spent their money and time on getting, furthering their education and then getting a good job that they had worked for, most of their life, and then to have that stripped from them and taken from them. I think it's easy for volunteers to just think that all refugees are coming from a thatch hut in a country in Africa, who may not have had any running water or experience with electricity or things like that. And not to say we don't have some people who that is their lived experience, but I think it's helpful to remember that not everyone is like that. Not everyone who's coming has that same experience, but I would say that pretty much everyone who comes would rather be in their home. They would rather be back where they were forced to flee. So it's really good to remember that they have fled and been forced to flee because of violence or conflict, and they've had to cross an international border. That just speaks to their resourcefulness, their creativity, their resilience, their intelligence. These are all things that I think it's really easy to think that just come in and view. Can just mute when you come in. Thank you so much. So volunteers are crucial to this process. Coming alongside newly arrived immigrants, you can answer questions, you can teach things about American culture, build relationships. Sometimes people have asked me, I've been doing this work a little over 8 years, working with volunteers and interns in refugee resettlement, and people will say, what is your favorite part of your job? And oftentimes my response is, my favorite part of my job is working with people who have such good hearts, who are just so generous with their time and their skills. I get paid to do this work, right? I get paid to show up. And people, when I say what my job is, they're like, oh, that's so admirable. And I'm like, but that's my job. True, I do feel I get to go home and feel like, I have made a difference in some ways. But I get to work with people who are not getting paid to do that, and they do it anyway. Have really good intentions, really generous hearts, and are generous with their skills and connections. But I also run into people who have good intentions, that those intentions can become obstacles to the family's journey to becoming self-sufficient. You may have such a wealth of skills and knowledge that it's easy for you to just do it for and not do it with. You just want to take care of people, you want to help. That's what I often hear is, I just wanted to help. And so I wanted to use this webinar to try to remind people that helping looks more like teaching than doing it for them. And there may be things you have to do in the very beginning or the initial period of their arrival, but I challenge you to always be thinking about how you can teach them how to do it. And that goes back to what I was saying is, I think innately we just naturally think that the immigrants are below us in the power dynamic, that they're just, because there's a language barrier potentially, or they do things differently, we think different, they do it the wrong way, we do it the right way. And that's not true. And so I wanted to take, just some time to remind people and challenge people to be thinking about, look at them and maybe you mentally call out their strengths. You just notice the things that they're good at. What are some things you can learn from them? That they may know different things than you know. And sure, they may not know how to do, there are ways that you can teach them and things you can do for them, but ideally we're all working towards the goal of them being able to do it on their own. So today we're going to discuss, again, practically, what does that look like? What are some best practices to ensure refugees and immigrants have the best opportunity for success? So I know that, if you've been working with us in the past, since October, then you will have been interacting with people from Afghanistan. But as we start to shift back to working with refugees, in case our Afghans are part of a program called APA, Afghan Placement Assistance, so they do not qualify as refugees. And so now that we're going back to resettling refugees, I just wanted to point out where you might be seeing people come from. This is actually kind of an old statistic, so the numbers are a little off, but it still represents the countries that we're seeing this year. We're going to see people from a lot of Congolese from Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudanese, potentially some Afghans still, and Somalians, and then I know everyone asked me about Ukrainians. So with the Ukrainians, we won't see Ukrainians come through the refugee process for some time. That's a long process that some of our refugees that are coming have been waiting years or decades to get to safety. They may have been, in a holding temporary place like a refugee camp or something like that. We may see some Ukrainians come on or apply for humanitarian parole, which is what our Afghan allies are. That's their visa status, but it's a temporary status that doesn't have a path to citizenship. So at the end of 2 years, there currently is not a path for people, our Afghans or our Ukrainians, who apply for humanitarian parole to stay in the country legally. There's a lot of advocacy around that. So if that's something you're passionate about, you want to advocate for, we really need a path to citizenship for those two groups of those two populations. Okay, so I talk a lot about do's and don'ts. I hope that you hear my heart. I hope that you know that I'm very passionate about this work. I'm very passionate about refugees and immigrants becoming contributors to our society. I've benefited so much from, my fellow immigrants, and I just want to help you benefit from that as well. So do show humility. The new arrivals have suffered trauma, whether it's losing loved ones or fleeing their homes or enduring a long trip to a new country. Let them know that you're here from them, and you'll help them get what they need. What things are they looking for? I love to tell stories in my trainings. That's how I never know how long it's going to take. But I remember bringing a family home from the airport one night, and it was really late. We got in to their apartment about 1 a.m, and they had run out of diapers that they had used up what they had in traveling. And so I was like, well, I was going to stop on the way, but I thought I just really want to get them. I just want to get them there, right? Get them they've been traveling for days, such a long journey. I'll run back out. Even though it's really late, I can go to a Walmart or something, get them some diapers. So get them into the apartment, and I just was asking them, like, okay, I know you need diapers. I'm showing them how to use the toilet and the bathroom and the refrigerator and stove and how to lock the door and all of that. And I was like, okay, is there anything else you need? Is there anything I can do for you? And they asked me if I had a compass because sorry, I'm distracted by the fact that I just realized I had a typo on do's and don'ts. They asked me if I had a compass because they wanted to pray, and they wanted to, be facing the correct direction. And they said, we're so grateful for this place. We're so grateful to be alive. We're so grateful to be here. We want to take some time. And I was like, it's like 1:30 a.m. I was just so impressed by their dedication to their faith. And just take time to pray before they settled in for the night. And I remember thinking, well, that's a first. Somebody asked me for a compass. I've been asked for a lot of things, but that one's new. So the point is, I've been doing that a long time, right? Like I felt like I knew what to ask. I felt like I knew what to make sure that they had. But you never know until you ask them. And they could ask you for something you just have no idea. I think it's also that you would not be able to anticipate the need. I think it's also really important to point out. I was talking to another. She grew up here in America. She was born in Afghanistan, and she started an organization here in the Atlanta area, helping former Afghan immigrants and some former refugees connect with Afghans who are coming now. And she asked me, she said, do you find that your Afghan clients are asking for things they already have? And I was like, yes. And she's like, I'm having a really hard time helping volunteers understand that just because they ask for food doesn't mean they need food. She's like, I keep telling them, go to their refrigerator, go to their pantry, look for yourself. And they'll be like, oh yeah, they've got plenty of food. And the reason that they may ask for something that they already have is because they never know when someone's going to come back to give them like food is a consumable product. They're always going to need it. So if I see someone here right now that might be able to provide for a need that I know I'm going to have, like that's extremely like that executive functioning skills, right? Thinking ahead, thinking about what I need, and thinking about asking them right now, because they don't know how long it'll be before they see someone again, or someone's going to take them to the grocery store. Even if a case manager's told them that, they've got here because I feel like lost a lot of trust along the way. They're here because of their trauma and their experiences, which leads themselves to not feeling comfortable trusting that just because you say you're going to come pick me up and take me to the store doesn't mean you are. Then they may ask people for, same thing with money. And let's say you go, on Saturday and you visit them and they ask you for something. You don't know that they haven't asked like 5 people before you and 3 people after, right? Like they may ask every single person they see that day. So maybe the case manager came by, and then a family member, and then, one volunteer, and then you come by, and then most likely they're asking every single person that they see the same thing, thinking that they're probably going to get a lot of no's, but maybe you'll get an yes. And so when you're being asked, you may think, oh my gosh, it's up to me to make sure this gets taken care of. And I've done this so many times, and then maybe I don't get back for a day or two, or sometimes even a week. And then I'm so proud, like I brought whatever they're looking for, needed, or asked, and they've already got it taken care of. They've already got it because they had asked multiple people before me and potentially even after me to make sure that their needs were met. So that can be really frustrating for Americans, especially, or for volunteers, for people who are wanting to help and wanting to feel good about themselves by helping. So the goal is that the need was met, right? So like, it's easy to be frustrated. Like, you asked me for this and I brought it, and now you don't even need it. But the thing is, instead, I would love for you to try to reframe that. I know even in the moment of frustration, to say, wow, look at that. You asked me for something and found a way to meet the need on your own without me. That's actually a success. So be flexible. We work with refugees and immigrants. And that means people coming from different walks of life, different visa statuses. And I am telling you, I've done this long enough. It is inevitable that the most recent news coverage is going to compel some people to volunteer that had not been volunteering before. So I'm going to get a call, let's say, it happened with Afghans, this happened with Ukrainians, it happened with Syrians before it was Rohingya Muslim out of Myanmar. So if there's a big news coverage, people are going to call and say, I want to volunteer with this particular population. And honestly, my reframing, I'm trying to be like, oh, wow, I'm so glad that there's good going to come out of this, that the news coverage is compelling people to volunteer. I'm grateful that the news does cover it. I'm grateful that there is, information is getting out there, and people are using that to volunteer. They're not sitting on their couches just numb to what they're seeing. But we will ask that you be open and flexible to working with different populations and different immigration statuses. We can't always facilitate volunteering with a specific culture. We do try, if you speak a certain language that's an asset, or you've been to or lived in a country where you understand the culture, we want to fit your skills and things that you're good at and comfortable with and love to do with clients that are going to benefit from those things. So we are trying to make that match. But I just think it's helpful if you can be flexible and understand that we may not have someone from that country, or a female at the time. If you're a female looking to work with females, it doesn't mean we won't. We'll put your information on a list. We'll follow up or loop back around. But in the meantime, you might have long periods of time that you're not hearing from us, and might get frustrated because you were so excited. You wanted to do something, you wanted to volunteer, you want to make a difference because you saw what was going on. And that's really wonderful. But unless you're coming to us saying, I just want to help, and I know that your organization works with people who are affected by conflict, how do you need me the most? Where do you need me the most? Unless you're saying that, then we might have to say, thank you so much for your desire to help. We'll let you know when we need you. And it may be tomorrow, and it may be 3 months from now. All right, so treat them as individuals. Honor their individual needs during a difficult time. Some recently arrived people may not want to talk beyond what's necessary information that they must provide. Others may be more social and open. I always say that, like, in American culture, I think it's good communication skills to ask follow-up questions. That shows that you are paying attention, that you're engaged in the conversation. But when we're working with populations of experienced trauma, we don't want to do that. We don't want to ask follow-up questions. We want to take whatever they offer and hold it and honor it and respect it. That may mean that some of the information they give you is confusing, or doesn't make sense, or doesn't line up. That could be because the English that they're using isn't exactly accurate, or it could mean that they're just giving you the information they're comfortable with you knowing, and and there are pieces that they're leaving out that would help you understand. I try to say that like our curiosity is not the most important thing in the world. Our desire to understand or know people really is not the most important thing. Most important thing is that we love them, that we, care for them. And as you become friends with them, most likely you will learn more about them. And you may have other, I had a client actually stay with me in my home a long time ago. We were providing temporary housing, and this person had a extremely traumatic past, and they were very open about talking about it in gruesome detail that was not actually appropriate for just passing conversation. So like went to my family's house for a holiday like Easter, or I don't know, maybe it was like, I don't think it's a religious holiday, like July 4th or something like that. And this person is just going into detail with family members that aren't old enough to process what they're saying. And so we had to teach like social in the US, like social norms around that, and be like, okay, well, here are the things that, why don't you try just saying this? And like, here are some ways to phrase it that alludes to and honors the trauma you've experienced, but maybe isn't as, as traumatizing for the people that you're talking to. And then you may have people who haven't really processed their trauma yet and aren't ready to talk about it at all. Have patience, understand that this is hard and frustrating for everyone involved. Families would rather be home. I think it's so important to explain to volunteers, but also for you to explain to your family members and friends when you're talking about this work, that these people are not in pursuit of the American dream and then reached here. They were forced out of their country and placed here. Anyone who's coming as a refugee, or APA, or unaccompanied minors, all of these populations were forced to be here. And if they could, they would go back home. That is the ultimate desire, is that whatever caused them to flee would calm down, or their country would be restored and they could just go back home. So this is not people who are coming over because they applied for a student visa or even a tourism visa. Our refugees and our immigrants through the immigration statuses that we work with, all of them have been forced to flee. Do respect boundaries. Refugees need to be who they are, even if they receive services and assistance congregations can give. So make room for their own ways of showing gratitude while giving their families the space they need to adjust. I think just kind of just goes back to different isn't wrong. Just because they do it differently doesn't mean it's wrong. And just, trying to be respectful of people who do things differently. Do treat them with sensitivity. Our Afghan refugees fled their homes, many with no family keepsakes or precious mementos to provide a tangible connection to the past. So just be sensitive to their loss. In my volunteer orientation, I often like to give the example when I was working with Syrians who had been forced to flee, and so they're the most similar to our Afghans in the way that they came to the U.S. Most of our refugees flee to a second country and spend years and years and years in a refugee camp or in their second country. But the Afghans were taken from their home, and maybe went to Germany or Italy or, and then to a U.S. base. So there was a lot of transition. But the point was that they were taken right as the conflict, not clearly not as the conflict started. It's been going on a long time, but during a traumatic event. Whereas our refugees are kind of years from the trauma that forced them to flee. Anyway, so I was working with a Syrian woman, and she lost her sister in Syria to a sniper. She saw it happen while her sister was holding her nephew. And when she came to the U.S., she was so afraid of forgetting her sister by being here in the U.S. and not back in Syria that she openly grieved every day, just mourning and crying. And it was beyond what was really not that they're beyond a healthy period of grieving. we're months into her being here, and it was inhibiting her health. It was inhibiting her ability to care for her family. And so I had become friends with her. I spent a good amount of time with her and her family. And so she was learning English. She picked it up really quickly. And we talked about what are some ways that you can remember your sister, but like designated either times a day or things you can do that you know you're going to have that time set aside to remember her, so that you don't feel like you have to hold on to her constantly and consistently. So ultimately, we determined that she takes tea at certain times every day, and that during one of those tea times, she would journal and look at pictures of her sister, and she would cry if she felt like crying, laugh if she felt like that. But every day during that tea time, it was the time, it was really dedicated to remembering her sister. And then that allowed her to let go the rest of the time during the day, because she knew every day there would be a time that she was dedicating to remember. And it's really hard when you think about not having any keepsakes or any tangible connections to the past. I've had people show me passport photos of their loved ones because it's the only photo that they had. So let's move on. Do build relationships. Make those immediate connections. Making this immediate connection shows the refugees that you're there for them. Understand that some folks may take you up on an invitation to a community event and others may not. Relationships manifest themselves in different ways. I think this is so easy to understand when you are thinking about your community group or your friend group. Like, you have some people, it's all over social media, right? About people who actually want to go out. They want to stay in. They make plans and then they cancel. And then you've got other people who are the life of the party and who are planning the party and inviting everyone over. It's different personalities. Humans are different. And the same thing goes for our immigrants. And you add culture onto it as well, but just understand that some folks may want to come to a community event, whereas others may want a more personal, relational connection where you're visiting them in their home. Don't donate items without checking first. So items that are sent to us, or us through the Welcome Co-op that hasn't been requested may be inappropriate, but inappropriate in like unusually costly to transport, and it complicates our relief effort. Goodness gracious. So let me give a couple of examples of this. One example is I was given, I'm trying to remember, like it was over 100 quart-sized mason jars with the hot chocolate mix. You know how it's real common to make hot chocolate and give it away, like teachers' gifts and things like that. And they were given in baskets with things that, I will say the church asked me what we needed. I gave them a list. They were so great to go out and either buy the items or have people bring them, and then the church had an afternoon where they assembled these kits and then they donated them. But apparently someone decided that she wanted to make these jars of hot cocoa mix with the marshmallows, and she tied twine. A very extensive, I know this person spent a lot of time. This is where I was like, I know that they had good intentions. I don't have families that drink hot chocolate, and now I have these big box. I actually had to take time taking them out of every single kit and putting them in a box, and then the box was too heavy for me to carry, and it just really complicated our efforts because someone didn't just check with us and say, hey, I was thinking about bringing this. And if they had, I would have been like, oh, maybe just put in some coffee or some tea. I could have given some other alternatives that would have been useful. And another example I'll give again about good intentions that are just kind of misled this is when I was working for a different organization several years ago, when the Syrians at the time had been forced to flee Syria, but it was under President Obama that he brought focused his efforts on relief to Syria and brought over a lot of Syrians similar to our Afghans, but it was a little different. Anyway, So Syrians were being forced to flee their country, but they had not yet started arriving in the U.S. This was in like October, November of that year, and I had someone from Athens, Georgia, which is about 45 minutes to an hour from the office that I was at, say that they had collected a bunch of blankets from like neighbors and community members and maybe even with their church. And she wanted to bring and donate these blankets to us. And I was like, that's great. Once I got them, a lot of them were those fleece blankets where you cut the ends, you tie them. So again, a lot of effort, a lot of time put into this. And she drove them all the way to me, and she got there, and her car is packed. All of the trunk, all of her seats to floor to ceiling. And she said, so the donors, the people who made these, I told them that we would send these to Syria. And I said, you want to send these to Syria? Yes, because what's going on in the news, we really want to make a difference. And I was like, okay, we don't ship things to Syria, so I think you're gonna need to like try to figure that out. And she was like, and I was like, and also most people aren't still in, like, there's not real infrastructure in Syria to receive these, like maybe Turkey or some of these other countries that they're fled to. Also, it's not cold there right now, so I don't think they need a blanket. And I was kind of walking through these things with her, and every time I would say something like, okay, we don't ship to Syria, but, coming up this winter, I could provide one of these blankets to every family that, every person that we resettle. And at the time, we were receiving a lot of people from Eritrea and the DRC, lots of people from countries in Africa that were not going to be prepared for the winter. So I was like, and she kept just insisting, no, these have to go. I told them they were going to go to Syria, yada, yada, yada. And it came down to it, and I said, okay, we've got two options here. You can take those blankets back with you and mail them to Syria, or tell the people that, sorry, you were misunderstood and you don't have a way to get them to Syria. Or you can leave those blankets with me, and I can guarantee you that we will use them to keep someone warm this winter. And you can either let your people know that, or you could just not tell them at all, however you decide to handle that. But if you leave them here, I am going to use them for people who would be cold without them. And those people are not going to be Syrians, but they're still going to serve someone. So this is good intentions with, just a little, needed some help redirecting or guiding. So that goes back to just, please don't donate things without checking first. There are some things that we need a lot of. And actually Cheryl, who manages our clothing closet, is on the call, and I'm sure she could tell you some stories of like, really you donated that? Like that didn't need to be donated. That just needed to go to the trash. But then there are other things where, we sometimes are begging for certain items. So if you ask, we could definitely lead you in the right direction. This is a big no-no within Spiritus. Don't try to convert people. Don't impose your faith on someone else. Don't proselytize. You may be volunteering because of your faith, but because of your faith, not theirs. And as a Christian myself, I like to say that, if I were uprooted from my country and plopped in the middle of a foreign country where I didn't speak the language and I didn't know anyone, and the journey there was so traumatizing and tumultuous, the thing that no one could take from me is my faith. No one can take that. They can take everything else, but they can't take my faith. So the thought of landing in another country and meeting people who are so kind and helpful and willing to try to help me and my family out, then what I perceive as trying to take my faith from me, it's going to be hard for me to take anything else that they are offering, because what I'm seeing is they want to take the one thing that helped me survive the trauma I've been through. And I know that we don't see it that way on this end, but that's why I want to reframe it and help people see it from the other perspective. Again, we work with people of all different faiths. And so, we're applying that same philosophy to our, Muslims who are working with our African families who may be a different faith, or to our Jewish congregations, and to our Christian or Baptist or whatever denomination. I'm going to get in trouble because I may be using the wrong terms, but my point is, no matter what faith, we have the Islamic Society, and we have a bunch of different. Actually have a Buddhist group as well. And my point is, I tell everyone the same thing of like, your faith is why you're volunteering, but let's not impose it on those and allow them to have their faith. We also don't use the term adoption. So your ministry is not adopting a family; it's supporting individuals and welcoming them as neighbors. It's possible I've used this term before. I'm not slapping anyone on the hand. I want us to all grow and improve and get better, right? Like, isn't that the goal? And so I'm really working on trying to dismantle this power dynamic where if you think you are adopting them, like that you then have some kind of like even like maternal ownership or maternal responsibility. And instead, I would much rather you see yourself as coming alongside, becoming friends with. They have families. They don't need adoption. They need support as they acclimate and then integrate into our communities. Don't impose or overstep. Refugees arrive with stories, but as much as volunteers might want to hear these stories or even share them with others, the decisions are up to the refugees themselves. Don't press people for information. This is like what I was saying. Don't ask follow-up questions. If they share it, don't pass it along without their permission. There's this thing called trauma porn, right? Where people are attracted to hearing about the trauma of other people. And that's just not something we want to perpetuate. We want to talk more about their resilience and their intelligence and the skills that they have and actually, again, with another story, I was talking to a former refugee, and as an adult, this person was an adult, and he said, I'm so tired of people talking to me about something that happened to me. I want to talk about who I am as a person, not what happened to me. And he also said, he was like, they only want to talk about something that happened to me when I was 6 years old, but I've lived, I think he was 26, like 20 years since then. And nobody wants to talk about the things that have happened to me in the past 20 years here in America. They only want to talk to me about what happened when I was 6. And he's like, I'd much rather talk about being a father, and this was a pastor, and a husband, and I like to read poetry, and I like to play this game. And so he was like, I'd much rather talk about who I am, not what happened to me. And that's really stuck with me, because to tell you the truth, if I see someone with a physical, a noticeable physical disability, or I see an interracial family, I have questions. I want to know more about their life and what those things affect their lives. And I want to learn from them, but I'm not in a relationship with the people that I just see that way. And my curiosity is not the most important thing. And if I come into a relationship with one of these people, then over time I'll learn those things. I don't need to just drill them with questions. Don't judge. Some congregations assisting a refugee resettlement may disagree with the decisions that refugees make, but new arrivals should have the same freedoms we have, which includes the freedom to make decisions and to make mistakes. I see this most often when families want to send money back home. Maybe more money back home than they have, then would allow them to have enough to pay for their own bills. And you can give your advice, sure, that absolutely, that this is what a friend does. But at the end of the day, they need to be free to make those decisions. They need to be free to, to quit a job that you think that they shouldn't, to move out of state if that's what they decide to do. And maybe you have more information than they do, and you know that the job they have is way better than the job they've decided to take. And so you can offer your advice and your suggestions, but at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that our families know that they have freedom here in the US, and that includes freedom to make decisions that we disagree with. We see people buying furniture that we don't think that they should have spent the money on, or gosh, I feel like every day we see our families making decisions that we disagree with. And we can offer our suggestions, like I said, our counsel and our advice, but at the end of the day, we want to empower them to make those decisions and to understand that they will then deal with the positive or negative consequences from those. And that's really hard, especially when you become friends with someone. It's really hard to see someone make a decision that you know is not the best for them. But if you love them and you care for them, that's exactly what you want to do. So don't presume their feelings. Refugees have been forced to flee their home country. So don't, again, assume they're happy to have left. That goes back to what I was saying before. All right, I'm going to try to move a little bit faster because I think I just have a few more slides, and I'd like to ideally try to be done close to 8 just so that we can have plenty of time for questions, because I know I've said some things that might have sparked, you may be having some conflicting feelings or some tension, and I want to give us space to just process and dialogue and ask questions about what you're thinking. So don't be a savior. Give them what they need, not what you think they need. And I think this goes back to even just me thinking that I knew what the family needed when they first arrived, with needing diapers or needing this or that, and they needed to know which direction to pray. Also, I had, again, with more stories, this is the best way I know to help put clothes on some kind of hard points. I think the points can sound pretty harsh, and so I like to help you visualize it with true stories, experiences I've been through. We had a organization who had some home decorators, interior decorators, that's what they're called. So that was their degree, and they ran a nonprofit where they collected lots of furniture and curtains and rugs and had access to a lot of generous people. And they we wanted them to set up an apartment for a family before they came, so that the family would walk in, to something a little bit more than what we are required to provide. The organization, I understand this, would rather work with a family who is already here, and I appreciated their reason for that was they wanted to consult with the family and find out what colors they liked, what textures they liked, what things did they want in their home. Were they really wishing they had a bookshelf or a coffee table or a rug, or none of that, right? So they did meet with the family a couple of times with an interpreter, but the way it was presented, the family didn't feel comfortable culturally saying no to anything that the volunteers were asking about. Like, oh, do you want to keep this couch, or do you want to get rid of it, or TV, do you want a TV? They were just like, whatever, like whatever you think is best. The family was just very compliant. Because they didn't feel comfortable. This is in the family's mind. They later were saying, this group has come to give us, lots of things that we couldn't have had on our own. So who are we to say no or to be ungrateful? So the volunteers came and they spent like a Saturday. They wanted to do like that show where it was like the bus or whatever. They wanted to do the whole makeover. So they asked that the family leave and be gone for the day, while the volunteers came over in and did this full renovation, essentially. And then when they brought the family back, they want to film the reaction. They want this like expressionate, response from the family. Also, different cultures don't express things the same way as Americans do. And so just because they're not crying or smiling like happy tears or smiling doesn't mean that they're not happy. They may be more stoic and also maybe they aren't happy, but a lot of times other cultures are happy without expressing it on their face. Anyway, they came in and it was just not the reaction the volunteers were expecting. And to tell you the truth, not the reaction the volunteers felt they deserved. And that's where it was like, okay, well, if you were doing this for the family, I think all of your questions would have been geared more towards that. And it's like, that was their goal, but I didn't feel like they executed that. If there was any kind of well or hesitation by the family, the volunteers quickly superseded it almost. There wasn't space for the client to really disagree. So they said, thank you. The client said, thank you very much. And then they didn't get, volunteers didn't get the expression that they wanted, and they left, and they called me complaining that the clients weren't more grateful. And they were upset. And, we had provided the family with everything they needed, right? Like there wasn't anything they needed, but there could be things that they wanted. Anyway, this volunteer group visited a week later, and the family had gotten rid of most of the stuff that the volunteers had added. Had just gotten rid of it, thrown it out, and tried to put everything back. They actually, the client actually called me or called a caseworker to find out if they could get the couch back that they had. Even though the couch was ripped and had some tears and stuff in it, it was the couch that they wanted, and they wanted it back. And unfortunately, the volunteers had thrown it in the trash, understandably. But it was just, anyway, I guess I can understand where the volunteers thought that they did a really great job, and it was beautiful and it looked great on social media, but it wasn't what the clients actually needed. It was what the volunteers thought they needed. And so this goes back to volunteering is not about you. It's not about the volunteers, right? It often starts with a desire to help. Ideally, your perspective will shift and you'll quickly realize families have a lot to offer. This is something I'm saying over and over because I really want it to hit home. But we work really hard to equalize and prevent an imbalanced power dynamic. That's why we focus on teach, not do, and preventing the Santa Claus relationship. Santa Claus relationship is what I call if every time you come, you bring something. Or if a family asks for it and then you bring it. And it becomes like you are the Santa Claus to the family, not you are the friend who lives life with them. And I'm not saying that if they have a need and you know how you have the network or the resources to give it, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. But I'm saying there could be better ways to provide that by giving it to the agency and letting us give it to the family and saying a volunteer or church or donor donated this. Or if there's something that they need, if you could take them to a thrift store or take them to a food pantry, if there are ways that you can show them how to get those needs met if it weren't for you. So there's a balance between, I don't want to say that if you have something or have the network to provide for a need that you shouldn't. It just shouldn't be every need. It shouldn't be that's what your relationship is based on. Again, I just going back to that, we work really hard to equalize, right, and prevent an imbalanced power dynamic. So I mentioned earlier about how we want to move people from surviving to thriving. So what does that look like? Successes and self-sufficiency and thriving looks like them being in permanent housing that they're paying for. Kids are in school. Families have found jobs. They have access to healthcare. That means they're set up with a PCP. That ideally it means that they know how to make the appointment, that they know how to get to the appointment, be it public transportation or taking Uber, or that they found connections in their own community to help them, or Medicaid transport, whatever that is, that they know how to get to the appointment that they need. They know how to make it and get there, and that they're enrolled in English language learning. Some of the challenges are immigration. I've talked just very quickly about humanitarian parole for Ukrainians and Afghans. That is a temporary immigration status. And so right now there's not a path to citizenship, or we might be working with undocumented or, they're children, unaccompanied minors, who all have different immigration statuses and need legal representation. That process is expensive. There aren't enough, I guess I'll say, for people to represent for legal representation. Transportation is always a challenge. Access to ESL, maybe depending on where you are, there might not be local places for that. I know in Alabama, they're having a really hard time getting our state ID and driver's license. These are some of the challenges, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and to say we don't have answers to it. We don't have solutions. It's not like we're holding it in our back pocket and just not giving it to you. So when you come across challenges with the families that you're working with, I think it would go back to like that, do be patient. Be patient with us. Like, everyone's frustrated. The family's frustrated. Our staff are frustrated. A lot of people in the government are frustrated. You're frustrated. And so when you feel frustrated, I think you should know, so do we. We've for whatever family or person you're representing or you're working with, we have so many more who are experiencing the same challenges, and we're feeling the level of frustration for all of them. And that it doesn't mean we shouldn't feel it. I just want to validate that, and I want you to hopefully recognize that we're in it together. We're in this together. This is a really hard time right now in refugee and immigrant services. So I think it's just, if you can understand that we're all in this together. I think everyone on here is a volunteer, but I'm recording this, and I would be remiss if I didn't make sure we cover our volunteer process for Inspiritus, which is an online application, also online background check, and then a orientation that we can do. We do virtually, live, and then we have a recorded version as well. Before we get to questions, I just want to mention who you can reach out to if you have questions that you think about. If after tonight you walk away and you're like, oh man, I really wish I had asked that. Or if you're watching the recorded version of this. Like I said, I'm the community engagement manager. That means that I am in charge of supporting our community engagement specialist in Birmingham, Savannah, and Atlanta. Like I said, soon to be Nashville. So depending on what area you're in, you can reach out to Betsy in Birmingham, Lindsay in Savannah, or Jenny in Atlanta. And I'm always available as well. But the further away from I get from being the community engagement specialist in Atlanta, the more subject matter experts they become. And so most likely they're going to be able to provide answers for you that I'm not even able to, because I haven't been in it for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to go to the last slide just so that you see this and that I come back to this, and I'm going to close my presentation so I can see everyone's faces while they're talking. But I want to let you know, if you put your name and email in the chat, I'll be sending out the presentation, and I've got a whole list of resources here that you can pursue or dig into if that's your personality and something you want to do. And then if you're watching this recorded, here's some follow-up homework that you can have. But I want to go back to the question and answer. Let's see, I've been away for a minute, so I don't even know who all's here. All right, so we don't have a ton of people, which means that that's going to give us more time for conversation. So if you have a question, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. Yes, Lucy, you're first.
So the rest of these folks don't know. We have just been assigned our first family. Are you hearing me? Yeah.
Oh, let me mute it because I'm not. Try that.
Okay, there. Okay, good. So we have just been assigned our first family. We're a church group, a Lutheran church group. And like probably everybody who gets involved, we're very excited about it. We're also American people who are used to having a plan. And we recognize, and I think, Sarah, you answered one of our questions, is that you really are not able to have a plan right now because this is a new category of refugees, or do you still call them refugees if they're
immigrants, refugees and immigrants.
Okay. So I think we've visited our family twice. It's been 2 weeks. And one of the biggest challenges is not being able to communicate at all with them unless, like when Jenny was there, she had a translator on the line. And then that first visit, the wife got a friend to help us, which, that's incredibly helpful. And then the second time, the husband got somebody on the phone. But I think what we are learning is that each time we will just have to figure out how we're going to make it work. My question for those of you who have been doing this for a while is, what is your experience with that, the language barrier?
Can you tell me what language they speak?
Oh, sorry. They speak Kari.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah, Dari, D-A-R-I, yeah. Not Farsi and not Arabic and not Pashtun.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and answer that. Is possible Google Translate, but honestly, connecting with someone over the phone is really wonderful. You could even try and ask the person when they're on the phone if they mind if you take their number.
Yes.
And then if you're coming at the same time every week, just are they available generally that day? Would they mind you calling? I think you're right. Not having a plan is very hard. I am a planner by nature, and so that is hard for me too. I didn't say this, but I started as a volunteer with World Relief, 12 years ago. And I remember, believe it still, how hard it was. And I remember, for me, reframing my goal and intention for my time together as language learning for them. And so how could I, are there any basic children's board books that I could work with them on learning? I wrote the words on index cards and put it on the door and on the lamp and on the, and all I did every time I went was work on English.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was something I naturally know how to do. I can speak English.
Well, that's a helpful thing, because I did order some books that I don't know if you can see these, that I plan to take next time. Yeah. I didn't think about putting the, labeling things so they can be practicing it when we're not there as well.
And over time, they're going to learn. They're going to learn from school. They're going to learn from ESL. They're going to be, you're going to be a place for them to practice.
And you said another thing, that we're not there to learn Dari. We're there to teach them English. So that's a good point too. Thank you.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wanting to speak to the lady that was just speaking. I can't see your name, and I'm having a senior moment. But anyway, there is an app on telephones. I personally don't use it myself, but there's an app where you can pick Dari, or you can pick Persian or whatever, and say something in English, and your immigrant can be listening at the same time, and it automatically translates your English words into their language. So long term, that's not the best thing, but it is a help at first, I think.
Yes, thank you. I think
so Google Translate, and then Jenny and Betsy, do you guys remember what the other one was?
There's one called Tarjimly, Tarjim. I think Jenny might be putting it in the chat. Tarjimly.
Tarjimly, okay.
And it's not necessarily, okay, she said Kahoot can also be used, Kahoot. So Tarjimly, I'm not sure that it is a free app, but I have had some volunteers in Birmingham using it for quite a while, and they said they don't think they've paid anything. So it's almost like FaceTime, and you choose the language.
Right.
And then it will also sometimes, you can send a text to the interpreter, and they will send you a voice message back in Pashto or Dari.
Okay, good. So I found this one. I don't know. Well, it's Google Translate, but we could not find Dari. We can get Pashto, and
I believe Yeah, I believe Google
Yeah.
Translate only has
Yeah.
Pashto.
So these may have Dari, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
good. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Miss Lee.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, I have sort of a question. We've been involved with the family for a few months, 2, 3, I don't even know how long, but anyway, since the first of the year. And Betsy, my concern, and I think it's a concern of others within our group, is that we don't know all the different deadlines and, how long is Medicaid going to last, and how long are food stamps going to last, and how long is rent going to last. And so we're all juggling that in our heads and trying to think. We would like as much specific information as we could have for our family so that we have the appropriate sense of urgency, or so that we
Yeah.
prioritize.
You know what? I think, Lee, it's been, you're right. I think it's been about 60, somewhere between 60 to 90 days, which seems insane that you've been introduced to your clients. So I think it would be a great idea, because we have had some developments in Birmingham. I think it would be a great idea for us to, you and Laura are great at putting that in an email and letting me have some questions. I think it would be great for us to regroup, especially now with where your client is in life and some new things that are happening. And we just got news today, some great news about IDs, state IDs. So fingers crossed. But I think that would be great, Lee, for us to regroup. So what if we put something together, if you and Laura wanted to, and Bill, come up with what questions y'all have right now about where the family is moving, not literally, but where the family is headed. And maybe let's kind of regroup with where we want volunteers, what we want your volunteer team to look like, because I think it would be very helpful for the family to start really figuring out what life will look like if they don't have people to depend on after, forever. And so I think that would be a great conversation for us to have.
Thank you.
Yeah, we could schedule that and do it at your church or online, whatever's best for everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that does bring up a question for me too, that some of our team have asked is, we don't know where the family is in getting IDs and getting connected with ESL services and getting set up for food stamps and the other services. Is there a way that can be shared with us? I mean, like Ms. Cooper was saying, that it will help us determine what the priorities are.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lucy. So I have to circle back with the case managers. And we talk every Monday and we go through the client list. So I would just have to circle back and answer those questions about Medicaid and food stamps. The family that we're talking about has been here since January. So I'm assuming that they already have food stamps at least. Sometimes it can take longer with our Division of Family Children Services. But yeah, I will double check with that and I will let you know.
Okay, that's good. All right, and then actually, Jenny, all of those things, where are they with their, when the families get here, are they connected with some kind of ESL service immediately, or are they waiting for us to help them with that?
Lucy,
Our
can you
case
see
managers-
the presentation that, am I sharing my screen?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
I wasn't looking
Okay,
at that.
so I just think that'll help you understand,
Yes.
enrolling in school, we have 30 days to do, whereas we have 7 days to get their application for EID. So I liked what you said about timeline and priority, and that is very much what happens is we prioritize to look at 10 days. We're supposed to have enrolled them in English class by 10 days. Now, this is suggested, and I do know that it was delayed just by the number of people, just the sheer, mass number of people we were getting, but this is at least helps you know what comes before other things.
That's good. And then I guess, so Jenny, you can identify for us, our family, where they are for each one of these services. Is that correct?
I can do that for you.
That's great. And then would you be able to send us by email that timeline?
Yeah, I'll do that for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Julia asked if I could just leak some of the news about IDs. Essentially, we got someone, the Alabama Driver's License Department went through an update, and they are currently, it is our understanding that they are now connected with Homeland Security and will be able to run our work permits like we thought they should be able to. And we have a supervisor that is in communication with Sarah Gallion. And so this is going to be still a trial and error process, but we've been given kind of the thumbs up to go ahead and give that a try. And we have some people that already have appointments. So we're going to be starting, and we can kind of talk specifics for anybody in Birmingham anytime y'all want. So Julia, we can touch base tomorrow.
And then if I may ask as well, I'm picking up a little bit from you all during this presentation that working with this type of immigrant is new. And so that's why kind of standard processes are not in place. Is that what I'm hearing?
100%. Yeah, this has never been done before. It was created after Afghans arrived in the U.S. Initially, there was no program for Afghans, and then what we call the APA, Afghan Placement Assistance Program, was created. But their visa status is humanitarian parole, so it is a temporary visa status. Now, for Afghans, a lot of them were already in the process of a different visa called SIV, Special Immigration Visa, which is given to people who served our U.S. military overseas, and then because of that, their lives were threatened.
Right.
So the goal and hope and intention is that they will be able to go through that application process during their humanitarian parole time and be granted that, which does have a path to citizenship, but not everyone is going to have that. So we've been advocating just for what's going to happen at the end of that time. And so because of that, man, October, November, December, it was changing constantly. They didn't qualify for food stamps at first. They didn't come with a work permit, but how are they going to work? And so it was like, and EIDs, which is your work permit, were taking 6+ months to get. And it was just, there was like a lot of things that was like, oh, actually, you know what? Now we're going to let them qualify for WIC. Now they get to qualify for, so it was constantly changing. Yeah. So I would say something and then I have to go back and go, good news, like they qualify for this now, but not this still over here. And it's been so hard to like keep up with it. I'm on regular webinars now about the Ukrainians. So it's just, we're building the planes in flight. But the refugee program was started in 1980 or 81. It is a well-oiled machine. It is a process. It is tried and true. It has been around long enough to work out the kinks. So our refugees, when they come, it's pretty seamless.
Yeah, and I guess, our group, not knowing anything about it, just reading what we can on the website, we thought these are Afghan refugees. So, the same process, only from a different country. But I hear what you're saying, and I've read a lot about those different categories. and how some of those have absolutely no resources that are incorporated into their arrival in the U.S. So our family, Jenny, do you know what the status of our family is?
Humanitarian parole.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
So if I look up humanitarian parole, I'll find out what they're what is available to them and what is not. Is that correct? As of today?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, like I said, it's very much they have this time frame to figure out what the next steps for legal pathway to citizenship will be.
Okay, thank you.
And on my list of resources, so when I send out that PowerPoint, one of them is the UNHCR, and it's that, and then there's a section for ORR, which is the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Those two links are very formal federalized links, but they've got a lot of information on it.
Okay.
Cheryl, I would love to just put you on the spot and ask you, what is like just one of the craziest things that you've had donated?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Someone recently donated one of those, I don't know if you've ever seen like decorative letters that people put up, and like I have one that spells love. And they donated the letter A, which just seems very random, and I'm not really sure what to do with that. but anyway, that might be one of the craziest things. There have been some other things, but yeah. That one kind of made me smile today or yesterday. So does anybody need a letter A?
I was thinking our father is Abdullah. I don't know if he would want that.
Well, it's lowercase. That's the other thing. It's not capitalized.
Probably won't fit the decor. Yeah.
That is even weirder. Lowercase a.
That's what they donated. That is odd. It started at the very beginning, I guess.
Well, maybe that's it. Yeah. So I don't know. There have been some crazy things. But right, I'm sure, I know that I can see that people go through this agonizing decision about, well, can they use this? Should I, maybe they really, really need this thing that, has a hole in it, or has something culturally inappropriate, a t-shirt with something that's, pretty inappropriate even for, Americans. And so I think they're just afraid that, well, maybe somebody really needs this t-shirt or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And they give it. So I'm sure they agonize, but it is hard sometimes to understand the thought process and some of the things. So but we get a lot of really wonderful donations, and people have been incredibly generous in the past 6 months, especially. So I'm grateful. And I actually, another question. Several people have asked me if you need furniture, and I'm not. Is Zach still the person that they should contact, or
we're directed to the Welcome Co-op?
Direct to Welcome Co-op. Okay, that's good to know. I think I sent somebody to you, Jenny. Sekou was asking me about furniture. Okay.
Yeah, and I believe I refer them over to Welcome Co-op too.
So for our group as well, and Cheryl, are you in Montgomery?
Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta. Okay, so that's the name of the, what did you call it again? Welcome what?
The Welcome Co-op.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close our time 10 minutes early, which is nice. And if you think of any other questions, I'm going to send this, well, note about the presentation, we put it on YouTube because it's too large of a file for me to email. So I'm not able to email it tonight. Our development team will get it on YouTube and I can send you the link, and as well as the PowerPoint and all of those resources at the end, but which includes all of our email addresses if you think of any questions moving forward. Thank you all so much for your time. I've had so much fun with this. I'm really excited about doing more of them, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
doing
you,
that.
Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.